Man is the only creature who refuses to be what he is. The main antagonist of Dying Light the Beast is Dr. Marius Fischer, codenamed the Baron. Most people felt the character felt underwhelming and underused and lacked depth. However, I disagree and believe the Baron was portrayed perfectly and would go as far to say he isn't a villain, at least not in the normal sense. We follow the story through the eyes of Kyle Crane, so our opinion on the matter is rather subjective. Each villain we have encountered thus far haven't really been villains, they are a byproduct of what the world has turned them into. Rise, a harbinger of chaos who wanted nothing but to see the world burn, was more than just a madman. After the GRE refused to extract the survivors of Haran, his brother would eventually get killed by the infected. Realizing the world and the GRE had turned on him, he decided to teach them what it meant to lose everything. Waltz, on the other hand, was about to lose everything. The GRE had attempted to weaponize the Haran virus, and because of their greed and ignorance, the virus escaped and nearly wiped out the world. His daughter was now dying, and if by saving her it meant sacrificing everybody else, then he would. Their actions were a direct cause from the world that had failed them. And what of the Baron? I understand the sentiment that he lacked a fear factor and perhaps depth, but like the other two, he was a direct result from the consequences of the state of the world, and in fact, he should be feared the most out of all the villains in Dying Light. Say the Baron isn't your typical cool or heck even terrifying villain, he is a realistic representation of human nature. Through Crane's eyes, he is a monster who deserves to die, and he isn't wrong, but perhaps we all missed something. When there are no consequences to our actions, our true nature is set free. During World War II and other events in the world, when scientists were given the freedom to use humans as experiments, the atrocities committed were heinous to say the least. Sinister things were done to humans in the name of science, and maybe just out of pure curiosity. What makes the Baron so terrifying is that in a world where we have absolute freedom, he'd be the norm. Consumed by his own vanity, he saw the opportunity and he took it. The world was now his canvas and Kyle Crane was merely the paint. The Baron was a calculated scientist. He wasn't cold or evil, he merely chose not to feel. The GRE wanted his help to weaponize the virus but failed and released the virus, so why shouldn't he use what was given to the world? Whoever controls the virus controls the world. If people aren't willing to take it, why should he sit back and not take it for himself? See, barbarism is a matter of subjectiveness. Things which we deem barbaric are to others a means to an end. Humans to him were just a stepping stone. Rise wanted to cause pain, Waltz wanted to save a life, but the Baron didn't even recognize life to be worth anything unless it could further his goals. That is what makes him terrifying, knowing that this is what humans can become if they were allowed to. He serves as a mirror revealing the true face of humans who wear a mask to conceal their true instincts. His goals are ambiguous and a little confusing. At first sight, it might seem like your typical villain who wants world domination. However, in the first trailer, we see this.
I do not feel obliged to believe that the same God who has endowed us with sense, reason, and intellect has intended us to forego their use. He has gifted us the means to decipher the code of nature, and it's our highest purpose we must strive to accomplish. I only answer to this divine calling.
The fall of humanity isn't an excuse to lose ourselves, but rather a gift. See, the Baron might be arrogant and even holier than thou, but he understands what we as viewers forget. There is no right or wrong, only the power to hold your own future. He has a divine task, and his tactics were cruel, sure, but he got results. He wanted to weaponize the virus to control it. He would essentially be able to save humanity by restarting it. With his research, he created a new species capable of controlling the virus and therefore dominating humanity. He also found, through Kyle and Aiden, DNA capable of resisting the virus. In time, he could create a vaccine, possibly even a cure. Now that we understand him a little better, I want to go over a few things you might have missed. And for that, we need to go back to the past. During some time after the events of Haran, the GRE and Marius Fischer with his pharmaceutical company began working together to weaponize the Haran virus. We don't have much information to know how much involvement he had in the creation of the THV. I believe their part was to find the psychological ways the virus affects a person, while the GRE was attempting to create a more suitable strain to control. Both working together could create the perfect killing machine, not just that, but one that could be controlled. We see in his lab he contained various test subjects in which he could study the different ways the virus could work or even be mutated on a person. This part I'm not too sure of, but during the mission where we go to the asylum, we find some of the Baron's research. The part I'm not too sure of is if these experiments were conducted before or after the fall. Either way, the research gives us new insight of how the Baron operated. If you want to skip this section where I go over the research, just head to the timestamp below. Subject Kurt. Condition severe psychosis unresponsive to conventional treatment. Procedure induced prolonged sensory deprivation. Notes: the subject was placed in isolation for 72 hours without stimuli to explore the limits of the human mind's ability to cope with sensory deprivation. The results were as anticipated. The patient began to exhibit severe dissociative behavior within 36 hours. By hour 50, auditory hallucinations were evident and the subject expressed a desire to self-harm, which was permitted under supervision. The desired result, complete loss of self-identity, was achieved within 64 hours. Outcome: patient terminated via voluntary self-mutilation. Subject Helga. Condition: depression, suicidal ideation. Procedure: electroconvulsive stimulation at 3 times recommended voltage. Notes: utilizing modern equipment, the subject endured 15 separate rounds of electroshock, each session exceeding normal voltage parameters. The objective was to determine if the heightened electrical stimulation would accelerate the collapse of cognitive function. By the 12th session, the subject exhibited complete neural disorganization followed by violent seizures. Outcome: subject non-responsive past session, categorized as vegetative, monitoring terminated. Subject Hans, condition paranoia, violent tendencies. Procedure: induce hyperphobia via adrenal overproduction. Notes: artificial hormone injections were used to accelerate the body's production of adrenaline, heightening fear responses. The subject's baseline was established before administering the cocktail of stimulants designed to overload the adrenal system. After 2 days of continuous adrenaline production, the patient's fear responses escalated uncontrollably, resulting in complete psychological collapse. Subject began to perceive constant, unrelenting threats in his surroundings, leading to severe physical self-injury in an attempt to escape. Outcome: subject expired due to cardiac arrest induced by overstimulation. Subject Ingrid. Condition: schizophrenia. Procedure: induced psychosis via sleep deprivation and stimulant abuse. Notes: the subject was kept awake for a continuous period of 96 hours with the aid of intravenous stimulants. By the 3rd day, auditory hallucinations were prominent along with severe anxiety and loss of coherent speech. On day 4, the subject's cognitive decline was accelerated by administering a mixture of stimulants and hallucinogens, which led to visual and tactile hallucinations. Outcome: the patient exhibited signs of psychotic breakdown before undergoing convulsions. Subject declared brain dead shortly thereafter. Subject Otto. Condition: treatment-resistant depression. Suicidal ideation. Procedure: forced isolation combined with neuroleptic injections. Notes: the subject was placed in total sensory isolation with an intravenous line of neuroleptic agents. The goal was to observe the effects of neuroleptics in combination with complete isolation on the subject's mental state. After 48 hours, the patient exhibited severe catatonia, which persisted despite attempts to break isolation. The subject's psychological deterioration was rapid, and within 72 hours, the individual became entirely non-responsive. Outcome: subject removed from isolation, terminated after no neurological activity. Subject Maria. Condition: delusional disorder. Procedure: chemically induced hallucinations and psychosis. Notes: the subject was exposed to synthesized compound designed to amplify her existing delusions. Over a course of 3 days, increasing doses of hallucinogens were administered until the subject was no longer able to distinguish reality from fantasy. The most interesting result occurred during the final session, where the patient began speaking in fragmented sentences of her past lives. The neural disintegration was near total by the time the final dose was administered. Outcome: subject lapsed into permanent psychosis, declared unfit for further testing. The atrocities committed by the Baron were simply the results of a divine purpose. To us, the viewers, he's the true beast of the game, a false messiah. However, this man has proven to be capable of taking the world by domination. This man accomplished what many couldn't. He weaponized the virus and created the next stage of human evolution. Even though we were only given 8 chimeras, I believe there are more either roaming around or still tucked away in his labs. The chimeras we were introduced to are the Reaper, the Defect, the Mist, the Behemoth, the Toxin, the Matriarch, the Wraith, and the Colossus. With the accumulation of his research, he managed to create an entire new variant, and its name, the Baron, is the perfect title for such a beast. Not only does it highlight how he views himself in this new world, but if you use a similar sounding word, Baron, it can signify the utter lack of emotions this creature possessed, guided only by ambition and purpose. Let's see the perfect species created by the Baron. For starters, the creature is skinless, perhaps suggesting the shedding of its humanity. The transformation tears the body apart, being reborn again as a towering titan compared to everything we'd seen. His jaw, like the volatiles, is ripped apart. He is fast, strong, highly resistant, and can rip the ground with shockwaves. He is a better and upgraded version of a volatile, the pinnacle of the THV. The last thing I want to talk about is the Last Supper and the symbolism behind it. You can either interpret Jesus being Crane or the Baron. If the Baron takes the place of Jesus, let's look at the comparisons. This was the Last Supper before both were betrayed. Olivia chose Kyle over him, which led to his eventual death. Both Baron and Jesus had a divine purpose and were killed for it. And under no way am I comparing Jesus to the Baron, but rather the symbolism this scene represents. Of course, this is left to interpretation. The final comparison is during the feast, Jesus says, "This is my body, which is given for you." In a manner, the Baron accomplished that statement in the literal sense. During his final moments with Crane, he sacrifices his body and becomes the beast. He sacrificed himself so that his ideals wouldn't die. He didn't kill Spike or the Doctor out of straight malice. To him, it was putting out a rabid dog. They were a threat that needed to be rooted out and destroyed. Now, the video has come to an end. The Baron might have disappointed many, but if you look hard enough, you'd find a human was a divine purpose. He served his purpose in the story. Of course, all of this is speculation and of my own opinion. Maybe some things were a far stretch, but I did enjoy him as a villain. But he was kinda underused and I wish we had seen more of him. If you think differently or disagree with some of my opinions, please let me know in the comments. Like, sub, or don't as long as you enjoyed the video.